This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 15. Amy Harrison. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 15 of Experts on the Wire. Before we get to today's interview with Amy Harrison, just a quick request. If you've been enjoying this podcast or not enjoying this podcast, please leave me a 5-star glowing review on iTunes and make sure to hit the subscribe button. I would like to get as many listeners as possible. I just want to come clean actually and say that the reason I'm doing this podcast is because I heard it's a great way to make a lot of money very quickly. And of course, I'm all about money. So if you could leave that review so I can make a ton of cash, that would be great. Actually, just go right to PayPal and PayPal me money directly at dan@evolvingseo.com. When you fill out the form, make sure to fill out at least $100, if not ideally $10,000 for the amount that you'd like to PayPal me. That way I can make as much money as conveniently for me as possible in a quick amount of time. I would greatly appreciate it if you did that. Dan. Huh? What are you doing? You're not supposed to care about money. This is supposed to be a show to help marketers do better marketing. What are you doing? Well, I heard this is a great way to make a lot of money quickly. Isn't this what I'm supposed to be doing? Getting a lot of reviews in iTunes? No. Don't you want to do something that you're proud of? Well, yeah, I'd be proud of buying that drum set I've always really wanted. Dan! Mom? Your dad and I have been listening to your podcast every day. And what are you doing asking for these iTunes reviews? Don't you want to do something that you're proud of? Well, yeah, I'm really proud of asking people. Well, yeah, we found it. I was trying to help him with his iPhone 6. His battery kept running out. He kept losing all his files. And we stumbled upon your podcast. And he said that you were trying to stuff keywords and tell people to put keywords everywhere in their podcast. Mom, that's not really you, right? I mean, you don't really sound like that. Yes, I do sound like this. Don't change the subject. Oh man, I'm going to be so embarrassed though. I just put this post on Moz and I was asking everyone to put keywords in their podcast. That's what I was recommending. You, my friend, have lost your way. I knew that wasn't Mom. Yeah, of course it wasn't Mom. It was just me trying to sound like Mom, my mom, our mom, whatever. The point is, do the intro over and do it right and stop asking people for reviews and just focus on doing a great show. Okay. I'm glad we have this chat. I'll admit, when I started this podcast, I really didn't know what I was doing or why I was doing it, but I realized I just love the craft of making things and talking to people and learning and sharing their knowledge with everyone. So that's really all I want to do. That this is just a show, a simple show to do that. I'm not trying to change the world here. I just want to help people and have great conversations. So I hope you enjoy this show all about humor in your marketing with Amy Harrison. Oh, and Dan at Evolving SEO for that PayPal for the money. Dan, stop that. Amy, how are you? All the way from the UK today.
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thanks for asking. It's very nice to have you on the show. I'm very excited to talk about copywriting and using humor in your marketing. But why don't we first give the listeners just a quick background on kind of what your day-to-day is now and what kind of roles and things that you do now?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, when I first started, it was a purely content years and years ago. And that has evolved more into marketing copy, sales copy. And at the moment, my time it's nicely split. I like the variety. So I have Write with Influence. That's my membership site for people that want to learn copywriting techniques. So part of it is generating sales for the membership site. I also do consulting and training as well. So a lot of businesses want to, get someone to do some in-house training and teach teams on how to write compelling copy. And I do some speaking as well, and then I actually do writing for clients because I love writing, and you've also got to keep your hand in as well. You can't really teach copywriting if you're not doing it day to day and seeing what works and what doesn't.
That's a really good point. You have to be a practitioner as well as the teacher and the consultant as well. So do you have any, I think I saw you're speaking at something coming up. That's how I found you. Is it social media market? No, that's happening this week. What are you speaking at coming up?
So I am in June. I'm going to Vancouver to speak at the Call to Action conference.
Okay.
Which is I was there last year on a panel. It's an amazing little conference, super practical. Really, they look after you from start to finish, from the food to the interactive nature of the conference, the quality of the speakers. So I'm really excited about going back there. And then I'm also talking at Elite Camp, which is in July in Estonia. And then maybe later in the year, I've got a couple of things, possibly Texas and possibly the Netherlands. So I'm getting around a bit, which is nice. I like to travel.
Excellent. That's great. And when you consult with businesses and train them, any particular type of business, or do you run the whole range?
It's really a whole range, because it's people who have found me online. They found me through my content marketing. They like my style of delivery. They've maybe taken a webinar that I've done, and they like the way that I teach. So I've trained companies from a variety of organizations. There have been conference providers. One has been an organization that promotes cultural relations around the world, between Britain and other countries. They tend to be organizations where you've got a team of people that need to write a lot of content. They've got to either sell or promote what they do. And what they're looking to master is some kind of system and some kind of process, so that they're not getting stuck by, oh God, we've got this copy to write again, and we're staring at the blank page. So that's what I tend to do. I go into a business, find out the kind of content that they're writing, and then look at helping them build a system around that, because that's something that I really like to do. I like to make copywriting practical for people. So giving them lots of templates, lots of structures, so that they can really focus on the more creative aspects of it, but within, they're not trying to do everything from scratch every single time they sit down to write.
You're also the host of Amy TV. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Amy TV is, it's going to be a weekly show. I started it a couple of years ago. My idea was that it was going to be the Sesame Street of content marketing. So I wanted something that would teach people useful tips, techniques, but would also actually be fun to watch. So each lesson has some kind of advice, some kind of copywriting example, content marketing tip, but then it's interspersed with little skits and comedy sketches to illustrate it. So I play a lot of different characters, and I love it. I started it a couple of years ago, and my big goal this year is to keep to a weekly schedule, because I know that when I produce it regularly, it gets a good response, and it really, really works for marketing my services.
Yeah, it's a really fun show, and I'm going to link up everything, by the way, in the show notes, so don't feel like you need to say, all the links and stuff. For people that want to catch those, just go to evolvingseo.com/wire. You can find all the episodes and show notes. We might chat a little bit about how you're making these videos at the end, but I want to dive in now to the copywriting stuff. This is where the audience, I think, will find a ton of value for what you have to offer. So the first aspect of this I want to jump into is something you call contrast. And You did a video about that. You did a video, and we'll link to it. And can you just explain what you mean by contrast and why this is important? And then we can get into how people can get better with this.
Yeah, sure. So contrast in copywriting, it's a really useful tool to make your product or make your offer pop out. So, for example, you've got to remember that your product or service doesn't exist in a vacuum. And if you're only presenting one choice, you can increase the value, or you can increase the perceived value of that choice by aligning it with something else. So, for example, and there's different ways that you can do it. So a really common one is to talk in your copywriting about the before and after. That's a really key contrast copywriting technique. And, what does your customer's life look like before you got there? And what is it going to look like after? And I love doing this with clients as well, because quite often it illuminates just how much value they have in their service. So when I get people to sit down and say, right, okay, what does your customer's life look like before? What are the problems that they're having? What are they spending too much time on? What are their frustrations? Where are their inefficiencies? Where are their pain points? Get all that written down and then say, right, now what does their life look like afterwards? How have you helped improve things, made things easier, made them happier, less stressed, more relaxed, etc.? What results do you get that they didn't have before? What are they able to do afterwards that they couldn't do before? And that tells a really compelling story, because someone who has those pain points and frustrations, one, they can recognize themselves where they are, but then also you're selling them the idea of where they want to be and showing that you are the bridge to help them get there. So that's one example of using contrast, before and after.
To make it a little more concrete, just to interrupt for 1 second, this sounds like it applies really well to maybe your marketing material for a product, like for a product page. Let's say maybe you're a software company. That sounds like a great example of a place this might fit.
Yeah, absolutely. But really, this is you could use this in all services. You could use this for if you were a life coach. So again, just think about, well, what does their life look like before? Maybe a lot of frustration, confusion, feeling like they're stuck in a rut, feeling like life's passing them by. They're not really doing what they're supposed to do. What's the after picture? What's the contrast? Clarity, feeling more relaxed, feeling more in the present. So it's not just necessarily for a product, although it really does work for anything, because you've got to think, if I'm offering something as a business, there has to be value. And for there to be value, there's got to be some kind of change. So inherent in that, there has to be some kind of contrast. What I want people to learn how to do is to communicate that contrast.
So what are some tips that you have for communicating? I mean, the concept sounds great. I know some people, when they're going to go to put pen to paper or try to come up with it, they might get stuck. So do you have any tips for kind of getting unstuck and getting a good contrast set up?
So there's different ways that you can do it. You can do it in long copy. You can simply tell the story of, this might be where you are now. Mm-hmm. And then by working together, this is where we can get you. What I would say is that if people are really stuck and they want to, really, start at basic terms, go through that process, go through that exercise, write out all the things, their problems, and, write out the before and after picture just for you in note form, and then pick out some bullet points and say, okay, which do I think are the most important to my customer? What are some of the biggest changes? And quite often, especially if you're writing something like a landing page, when someone gets to that page within seconds, one of the things that they want to know is, am I in the right place? So if you can give a couple of bullets that show, does this sound like where you are now? 3 points, the frustrations, the pain points. And also then what the contrast is. So afterwards, I am able to help you get to this particular stage. That's something that, is very quick, very easy to do. But if you have that somewhere at the top of your copy, it makes a clear statement. Mm-hmm. Here is the change that I'm able to give for you.
And is contrast something that can apply like in a blog post that's not, it's not sales copy, but it's more informational copy? Can it apply there as well?
Yeah. What are you thinking?
So, I'm thinking just the idea of contrast. So this sounds like it's something very useful for selling your product or service. What if somebody's writing a blog post? Is this something that they employ in that sort of content, or is this only more for like product and service oriented content?
Well, I suppose it depends on the post. I mean, the thing with using contrast is that it's a tool for illustration. You're helping people visualize one choice against another choice.
Got it.
So yeah, you can use that in a blog post. It's more of a writing tool. It works really well presenting your offer compared to something else.
Would another fashion of contrast be like comparing two products or two types of products?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I really like people to have a go at is something that I call comparative value. So what I get people to do is think about the product and think about the results that your product gets for someone. So, not so much what it is, but what are the results? So does it get your customer more leads? Does it help them find the perfect home? Does it make them love their body? Then I want you to think, okay, what else could get those results? What are the other options? But the thing that you want to think about is ideally this other thing should not be as easy to use, or maybe is more expensive, or there's more barriers to using this method. So for example, my friend and business owner, Rachel, she has a business called Bridea. And what she does is she sells boxes of samples to brides-to-be. So she works really hard to go around and research all these different samples, things like wedding favors, decorations, things that you need on the day. And she picks the best of the bunch, puts them in this beautiful box, and then she sells them on her sites to brides-to-be. And her tagline, one of her in her copy that she uses, is that she says, "This is like the best wedding fair delivered to your door." That's a really good example of using comparative value, because you're saying, look, here is a whole box of samples that otherwise, if you wanted to get these, you would have to go to a wedding fair, you'd have to travel, you'd have to trawl around all the stalls, you'd have to do all the legwork to get the same results. Or you can just buy this box. And they're really popular and it works really well. So that's something that is often used in copywriting. If you've got a information online product, say, for example, say you've got a course, you might want to compare that to going to a physical workshop, or going to a live event where you could say, look, you're going to get the same results, but you don't have to leave your home. You don't have to book in accommodation. You don't have to fork out a high ticket price. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting because I talked to Rhea Drysdale a couple episodes ago about how actually a lot of SEO companies are in competition with tools. It's not like agency versus agency all the time. It's agency versus like software. And I think It's similar to what you're saying, is it might not be a workshop versus a workshop. It could be, an information product versus a workshop. So yeah, I think it's great to think that way. So could a business or somebody that runs a website kind of do a little audit for themselves and kind of comb through their site and maybe ask themselves if they're using contrast? Is that kind of, because a lot of people already have sites that exist and maybe they can just go through and see and ask themselves, are we using contrast?
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you telling that before and after picture? Are you showing what your customer's life looks like, say, with or without your services? Because that before and after is so compelling. That's, we love, if you look at any kind of, particularly in the fitness industry, what do people want? They want the before and after photos,
right? Because
that is so compelling. That shows a difference. And that's what people want. They will invest in change and, and in a positive change. And also I would definitely, if I was a business, be looking at where, what other things could get similar results, or how do I get similar results to something else that is maybe more expensive, maybe harder for my clients to get hold of. And I think we're seeing this a lot now because there's a lot of disruptive innovation. So you've got you've got services like Uber, you've got Airbnb, and they are great examples of this because it's like, well, we can get you the same results as, say, booking a hotel, but we're a lot cheaper. We're a lot more flexible. You'll get somewhere a little bit more interesting. So I think that we are, like you say, SEO companies are no longer competing competitor to competitor, but there's so many more tools out there. So it's definitely worth sort of thinking about that and see if you can be creative and put that into your content.
Absolutely. I love that approach. I want to jump to another thing you talked about in an article called umbrella terms. And this is something you mentioned, it might turn away a customer rather than doing what they want the customer to do. So can you explain what umbrella terms are, why they might not be good, and how to maybe a better way to speak to your customers?
Yeah, sure. So umbrella terms, they tend to be used by businesses in their marketing, and it's when someone's trying to sum up, and it tends to be in short snippets of content. They're trying to convey the entire value of their offer. So you often see these in bullet points or in short pieces of content where a business is trying to sell the idea of their product or service. And they sound like terms such as high quality, premium service, industry leading. And I call them umbrella terms because they're trying to cover all the different little individual features and the things that make that service high quality, that make that service premium. The problem with umbrella terms is that they're not necessarily bad terms, but if you're using them on their own, if they look like they're on the page in isolation, so for example, if you've got a list of bullet points that say, we offer a high quality premium service, we're an industry leading company, they're vague, they're generic, they're ambiguous, they're used by a million of businesses out there, and basically they just get ignored.
What strikes me when you're describing umbrella terms is these actually have a lot of utility, not only on your website, but I'm thinking of proposals, emails, any communication point between you and your client. So do you see that as well? Like this can trickle into all the other areas of somebody's marketing.
Oh, definitely. And it, and this is the danger of them, is that they can creep in and you can get so used to saying that, hey, we're high quality, etc., that you don't actually realize how you're coming across. And I put out a video and an article about umbrella terms, and I got this great response from a gentleman on Twitter who said that he'd been at an event and yesterday he'd heard someone say, we are the best in biz, providing full range of solutions for maximum effect at low cost.
Oh goodness.
That's like a perfect example of how umbrella terms, even just trickles into language of when we're explaining our services to someone. And he was saying, he said so many times at this event, I had to keep saying to people, but what do you do? And that's the thing that we forget. And the danger with your content is that people aren't going to ask you that question. They might ask you it face to face, and you might get this idea like, maybe my communication is not really getting through. Mm-hmm. But in your copy, what's going to happen is people will just click away. They're going to keep searching until they find someone where the content resonates with them in specific terms.
I think this interview might actually help me. You asked me before the show, well, who is this podcast for? And I even had trouble explaining that, and I've quite transparently had trouble finding a hook for my show. So I'm definitely going to go back and kind of listen to the tips you're giving, because I think that's a trap that I've been running into, is thinking in umbrella terms for this show rather than maybe trying to be more concrete and specific. So that's another area it could apply as well. So when a business is kind of evaluating their umbrella terms, like, can you give us an example? Like, let's say you're a sneaker company and you're like, we make the best high quality sneakers. Even they might even say most comfortable sneakers, and that gets a little more specific. What's an example of how they can, of how they can dig deeper and get more specific and avoid these umbrella terms and use something better?
Okay. So what I want to stress is that these terms it's not like they're bad words that you must never use. It's just that on their own, they don't work. So you need to qualify them. So what I suggest people to do is, if they're providing me with copy that says, we make the most comfortable sneakers, my question is going to be, why? Like, how do you do it? And this is the part that a lot of businesses overlook, because they're taught to, especially in marketing, they're taught to don't talk about features, talk about benefits. Mm-hmm. The thing is, your features are the proof behind your promise. So if you're saying they're the most comfortable, well, why is that? And that could be because of the type of materials that they use, or that's because they're able to, give a more accurate fitting service because they can scan your foot and then they can show you exactly, how your shoe is going to be made in order to make it super comfortable. You need a little bit of qualification. So, because if you're saying that something is high quality, I'm assuming that it is high quality. You haven't just sort of, you're hoping that if you say it often enough, it will make it high quality. So there's got to be something behind that. And that's what I look for. And if I'm writing for clients or if I'm training clients, I want to say, well, show us the process, show us the proof behind the promise, and include that. And then you can couple that with an umbrella term. So for example, our so-and-so technology means our customers are the most comfortable. That would be okay. Or the, whatever proprietary material that they're using makes these the most comfortable sneakers in the world. Then you've got a bit of substance, and you've also got a little bit of intrigue. Like, oh, wow, well, what is this technology? How does it work? And that's maybe something that you would expand further on in your, later on in your copy.
Yeah, that's a great tip. When you're talking about umbrella terms, I also think of when marketers are telling people, well, you have to create quality content. And it's like, duh, of course you need to do quality content. Do you have any advice for when we as marketers speak to people that we can be more helpful or more specific? Because then you hear people say, well, it's got to be compelling or engaging, and they just kind of move to the next umbrella word. So what's some advice that we could have in that realm?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I like to do, and what I find works really well with content and copywriting is to show examples. And I do get why marketers say create compelling content, because it's so varied as to what compelling is. It's not an easy one to say, well, what makes compelling content? Well, it's going to be based on who your target market is, the problem that they're trying to solve, the even down to the style and the tone of language that they have. So are they a formal audience? Do they want very dry how-to information, or are they looking for content which is more humorous? So for example, the people there will be a certain target market that love my videos and they feel like they know me and they want to work with me. But there will also be a target market that look at my videos and say, nah, not, she's not the right fit for us. It's not compelling to them. And I think that's why it's really hard to give this advice as to what makes compelling content. And it really comes down to knowing your audience and giving them something that they want to consume, but also that after they've consumed it will help them do something. Right.
So you can almost go in a step in the right direction and say, create compelling content for your target audience. That's even a step better.
Yeah. And I would say it boils down to two things of, what is it that they're trying to do, but also what do they enjoy? What kind of content do they enjoy either consuming? Are they really keen to see video tutorials, or do they want to read about it, or do they really like to listen to it on the go in terms of a podcast? So the medium and the message is really important for you to experiment with. I mean, I've tried a whole bunch of different mediums. And some people like certain ones over others, and that is part of the process of getting to know your audience. This is not something you're going to know out the gate.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned humor, and I think you knew this was coming because I definitely wanted to chat about humor in your content. So the first thing I want to ask here is, and if anybody goes to Amy TV, they're going to see that, of course, you're putting a lot of humor into your videos. Is humor something that comes naturally to you, or is that something you kind of had to work on?
I think it comes naturally.
Well, I think you're funny. So I guess my point to say there is that, somebody could try to be funny and think they're funny, but not be funny. But I think objectively speaking, your videos are humorous.
Yes. Yeah, they are funny. And it's not something that I've had to cultivate. It is that they are very much me, that is the way that my mind works. And one of the things that I would say is if you're interested in putting humor into your marketing, definitely don't force it. What you want to do is encourage yourself to find your style of humor, because all comedians have a slightly different style. Some people are very big on wordplay. Some people are big on one-liners. Some people are big on telling a great story. My approach tends to be a bit more fanciful, a little bit absurd, a little bit irreverent, simply because that's the way that my mind works. So it is relatively natural. My family are very funny. I'm probably the least funny person in my family. Like it's almost, when we get together, the key thing is that we want to try and make each other laugh. So there's a lot of banter, and you you'll get listened to and you'll get attention if you can tell a humor story, if you can be engaging. And I think it's just been my desperation to get attention that has maybe made me cultivate that humorous side of my personality.
That's great. And yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of instances, people when they grow up with it in their families, it gets cultivated. I think my wife can attest to that. My family is not very funny, and I'm sorry if my family is listening to this, but they're not very funny. And like, I'm not super funny, but I tend to be the funniest one in that. So it's not saying much. But on the other hand, I've seen people that come from very funny families and backgrounds that just humor comes naturally. So what I want to ask is, what are the benefits you see of putting humor in your content? Is it just a way to connect with the right people for you, or what are the benefits there?
Well, I tell you what, the if I'm honest, the primary benefit was that this was something I could really get excited about creating. I love films, I love making videos, and it was something that was a personal thing. I just thought I could see it as being a good way to deliver marketing, because I thought people, there is a rationale that people are more likely to share something that's amusing that they would watch anyway, rather than say, hey, do you want to watch my video tutorial on this particular copywriting technique? So it's got that added layer of shareability. And it's different as well. It definitely differentiates me from other copywriters. And it was a bit of a gamble, because I thought, I'm putting out something that is so close to my personality. If people don't like it, they probably won't like me. However, that's the plus side as well, because this is so close to my personality that I wouldn't do it any other way. I really am doing it because I enjoy it. I get a lot of fun out of it. And I think that passion and that infectious humor, it comes across. But it's really interesting, because in terms of who it attracts, they're the same kind of clients that come through my other channels as well. What's nice is that people really feel like they know me when they see the videos and then want to hire me. And also, they tend to want to work with me rather than just hire a copywriter. And that's a really nice way to start a relationship.
Absolutely. So I'm going to guess you probably wouldn't say blanket statement, everybody should try to put humor into their content. Is there a right and wrong place to be doing this, or right and wrong content types or business types, or how do you view that?
Yeah, I think people can tell if it's forced a mile away. So if it's something that you really don't want to do, but you think that you should do, it's probably a bad idea and will probably end badly.
Yeah.
I think certain industries don't lend themselves to humor. I think maybe if you're a funeral director, you probably don't want to be, doing a lot of humorous videos about your service. Having said that, it can work really well, even in more serious domains such as business to business. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think, and this guy, his name escapes me, but he used to write for a lot of comedy shows, but he also worked for a software company. Oh God, his name's on the tip of my tongue. And he did a lot of funny videos for the company that he worked with. Mm-hmm. That was selling software. That was selling, it was either software or it was network support, but it was a really dry product.
Right.
And he did it very well because he did it very intelligently. And what it did was it poked fun at the problem and that clients were having, rather than poking fun at the company. And I think that's really important as well. You don't want to be seen as a clown unless you are a clown. You don't want to undermine what you can do. And that's why I put a lot of humor sort of around the problem, around the frustrations that my clients are having. But you don't want people to say, wow, that's very funny, but I don't take them seriously as a practitioner of whatever it is that they do.
Yeah, and you don't want to alienate your audience. I know I've heard a lot of comedians speak to, like, Seinfeld and so forth. We'll talk about wanting to immediately establish a relationship or a rapport with your audience the second they walk out on stage. I imagine it's the same with creating content. You don't want to push away your potential audience. So is that a mistake that you see some people make sometimes?
It is, and I remember I did have a client who was asking me for help around making his content a little bit more humorous, and he sent me some copy to look at and some scripts for a video to look at, and I said, okay, well, the first problem here is that you're basically just insulting your clients every step of the way.
Yeah,
and he said, oh, but that's kind of my style, I'm quite dry and I'm quite sarcastic. And I said, that's fine. And probably he was used to working with people one-to-one. He said, I have a lot of fun with my clients. And I was saying, well, that once you've got that rapport going and you are face-to-face or you are talking to them one-to-one, that's probably something that you can weave in and that feels natural. But if you're using that as your marketing, as an introduction to who you are, it's not going to work. It is going to alienate people. You don't want to insult your customer. You don't want to tell them that their problem is their fault or that they're doing something wrong. You want to get them on side the minute that they come onto your, little stage, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You definitely want to be careful for that. So you mentioned a few types of humor, and I was wondering if you could just kind of go through those again, maybe, so the listeners can catch those. I think you said irreverent, maybe dry, maybe sarcastic. Are there general categories of humor that like somebody can kind of go through a list or file through when they're trying to, figure out how to put humor into their content?
Do you know what? I'm not sure. That's a really good question. I don't know that there's a definitive list. I tell you what made me really think about that though was, do you know Monty Python?
Yes.
Okay. So I love Monty Python. And what's interesting as well is that within that group, we sort of put them together and we sort of have this idea of this style of comedy that they do. But within that group, they were very, very different styles and they didn't all write together because they had very different styles. Mm-hmm. So John Cleese would tend to write with Graham Chapman and their sketches used to be very verbal and quite aggressive and absurd. And then Terry Jones would write with Michael Palin and their sketches tended to be a bit more surreal and a bit more fanciful. And then Eric Idle used to write on his own. And his were a lot of wordplay, using a lot of puns and a lot of play on words. And if you watch Monty Python or listen to their records, you can see, sometimes you can pinpoint, that's probably they've probably written this because even though it's within this Monty Python style of comedy, there are different types. And so I think it's just a case of, if you're interested in humor, watch a lot of comedians and try and see, what are the differences? How is the delivery difference? Are they, really working along delivering a punchline? I mean, me personally, I am terrible at telling jokes. I forget the punchline. I give it away too soon. It's just not something that I could try and do. Like I'm a total joke killer. But I tend to be able to tell a pretty funny story. And, I tend to look for the absurdities in situations and sort of bring those to light.
One thing I can think of just as a little tip that I've seen out there is if somebody's trying to inject some humor in is to find funny photos or memes. That tends to be kind of an easy way. It can be a little slightly lazy approach too, but it can work if you use, I think, memes or images that, you don't see everywhere. And
totally.
Yeah. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, and do you know what? It's funny that you should say that because I think a lot of people that say to me, I'd like to experiment with humor. There's a lot of things that I find funny. It's a really nice way of gently testing the water with your audience of, creating a little meme or sharing a funny picture and seeing how it goes down. And seeing what gets shared and, sort of if you don't feel ready yet to create something that is personal and original and humorous, look around, browse something like Reddit and look at the funny photos and, see what styles tickle people. And then try and, if you can find something that relates to your target market and share, see how that goes down. And that's just a nice way of testing the engagement around humor for your target market.
I really like that tip of browsing Reddit. One thing I want to ask about humor, because you mentioned earlier in the interview about how you'll go into a company and help them set up processes and systems. And I could see somebody, personally like yourself putting humor in your own videos being, pretty straightforward. But when it comes to a brand or a company, how how can they must need to approach this in a more thoughtful way, right? With like maybe brand guidelines. How can a bigger company kind of work through this process of maybe bringing humor into their marketing?
Yeah, I think it's
Does it kind of start from like the top? Like, does the CEO have to be funny, and then it kind of trickles down? Does it depend upon the product? Like,
yeah, I think it's interesting. It's not necessarily that the CEO has to be funny, but I think it has to come from top down, that there is an openness towards creating, funny, humorous marketing. They have to be, because if there's any sort of hesitation, it will just get killed. And I think also it is probably best to assign it to someone within the company who is humorous, which might sound obvious, but you don't want a massive committee trying to make a funny video, because quite often you'll just find that ideas are killed very quickly, that it becomes sort of vanilla and bland. You'd be much better off finding one person or a couple of people that work well together, that bounce off each other, that can come up with some ideas and sort of protect that until they have something that they can show and create. And then obviously you are going to want to run it past people, make sure that you're not, going to be sued. But I think it is harder for bigger businesses to do, and it comes within that culture, which usually comes from the top down.
And not to put you on the spot, and if you can't think of anything, we'll put in the show notes, but can you think of a company that's good at putting humor into their content?
Oh, yeah. So, there's a couple of things that come to mind in terms of adverts. There is, the ones that I'm thinking of are mostly adverts. So there's a massively viral video out a few years ago for a product called Poopery, which was, so if you've seen that, that's a very, very, that's just great, because it's tackling convention. And the ones that I've seen that have done that really well are those. There was also, I think it was a company in the UK, I think, that made sanitary towels and tampons, and they did a response. Someone had posted on the Facebook page about how it was a boyfriend complaining about how their adverts misled him to believe what his girlfriend would be like during her period, and they did a fantastic response, a satirical response of supposedly the CEO of this company saying you couldn't handle the truth, and it basically goes around it. It focuses on that. That did really, really well. And then there was some great ones, and I think it may have been for General Electric. They were Jeff Goldblum. Mm-hmm. It was Jeff Goldblum. And it was about lighting in your home. And it was for certain light bulbs. But it was basically, if you have the right lighting in your home, you will look as good as me and you will have as successful a life as me. That was very, very funny. And I think that's a great example of something that's an incredibly dry, pretty boring product. And that got a huge amount of attention.
Yeah, and I think Dollar Shave Club is an obvious example as well. They took a very, very dull product and made it funny. Before we go into the next copywriting thing, do you have any favorite comedians?
One of my big loves is Louis C.K. So I've just finished, and he's just amazing. In terms of comedians, he is the storyteller. He, maybe I saw him live, and he doesn't cover a huge amount of different topics. He will have one story and that will build and build and build. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, he's just finished a series called Horace and Pete. That was like a drama that he released online. You could buy it episode to episode, and that's just finished. And it was amazing. And it was very dark. There were some moments of humor in it, but it was just all based on telling stories. He's such a master of pulling you in from the word go and creating these stories where you're just completely gripped from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think it's a great tip that content creators have a lot to learn from comedians, especially somebody like Louis C.K. And I agree, I think he's a genius when it comes to comedy. And he can turn on a dime as well, which I'm sure you noticed. Like he can be going down one path and all of a sudden he'll just completely do a sharp turn and take you in an unexpected direction. And I really like that. Have you heard of a comedian by the name of Mike Birbiglia?
I haven't, no.
He, I think, is probably, as a storyteller, I don't want to say better than Louis C.K., but just even more of a storyteller in a comedian format. So I would definitely check out Mike Birbiglia. And he has a great independent film called Sleepwalk with Me. He actually has sleepwalking disorder in real life, and it's really hilarious. So definitely check that out. So I love the humor stuff. I could obviously talk about that even more, but I wanted to jump to another topic I think the listeners will find useful, and that is product naming. And you wrote about this as well, and we'll link to that in the show notes. What's really the benefit, or like what are the mistakes you're seeing when companies are naming their products, and what are things they can do to fix that?
And this is something that I wanted to write about because I definitely have struggled with it in the past. It's so hard to think of a name that is, that is catchy, that has impact, that, conveys some kind of aspirational result, but isn't so out there that you don't know what on earth it is. And I think a lot of businesses really struggle because you don't just want to, you've got two extremes. You've got one where you just simply say, I have this product, I have web design, I do life coaching, this is something that you can buy from me. And then the other extreme is where you just create these crazy names that people just don't know what on earth, it is. And I think that's because they look at things like Google and they say, well, Google, that was amazing. And who ever heard of the name Google before? So we can call it anything and, we can make it work. Yeah. And I think for the majority of businesses, what you want is something in the middle. So something that is a little bit creative, something that is a little bit different, but still conveys what it is that you do. So what I, in the article that I wrote about was basically about sort of moving along that spectrum. So first of all, thinking about, very dry, literally what it is that your product does. And then look at different ways of, what else does that? Where can you maybe draw parallels to that? So if it's, for example, a security system, well, what else is secure? Padlocks, barbed wire, personal bodyguard, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And it's then having a look at how can we maybe combine these or come up with ideas to combine these so that we have a sensible product name that sounds different, but still conveys, the value of what we offer and also what it is that we do.
Yeah, really good advice. And I love kind of looking at product names and analyzing them. One I could think of right off the top of my head is Amazon. Just, it's a real word, but, the whole A to Z thing, and it kind of sounds like amazing. And there's a very interesting me to kind of pick apart and analyze that and think about why they might work. Like some of the most popular apps are really great names. You hear a lot of people, what do you think about this? You hear a lot of people say, well, you don't need a great name if it's a great product and you promote it and blah, 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 it'll catch on. But if you look at like Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, Twitter, they're all great names. Doesn't that play a part in their success to some degree?
I think so, yeah. And it's interesting because this is a pretty common naming technique, is trying to splice together two words, that give an idea of what the product is. And I think that can definitely help because it's a shortcut of communicating what it is you do. Like Pinterest, like pinning pictures of your interest, Pinterest, it's great. It works really well. I think that, for certain companies, going down that route and investing, in a lot of, just getting that name right is going to be worth it. I think that for, say, your average, small to medium business where they're just trying to find a name for their product which sounds a little bit different, you don't maybe need to have it that, you don't need to have it that kind of out there. But I don't think it's a coincidence that those apps have caught on because very quickly you can understand or get an idea of what the product or the app does and is about.
Yeah, they're very easy to say, almost fun to say to a certain degree. There's an app I always say is the worst name, Jelly. I don't know. I can't even think in my head what that app does anymore. But have you heard of this? The Jelly app?
No, I haven't.
That's the worst name, in my opinion, for an app. Like, it's just, I can't even remember what it does based upon the name.
How is it spelled?
Like jelly, Jelly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing as well with the, you think like Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, you don't have to ask how they're spelled. And right. I think that is like, I remember so many times people have said to me, "Oh, I've got this new app." And what was it? Someone, I don't want to say the name in case like they sort of hunt me down.
Yeah.
But this person said, "Oh no, it's really good. And it does this particular service." And I just could not for the life of me figure out how to spell it. So when I was trying to Google them and find them, I was getting nowhere because it was something like juicer, but it was spelled like JOOZE. It was just nothing that I would have ever got my head around. So, that's the thing. You don't want to paint yourself into a corner with a name that's so out there that people can't spell or find or pronounce. Yeah,
not to. I'll say one more thing about this. I had a guy by the name of Mike Bruni on a few episodes ago. He told me about this.
Oh, I think I know Mike.
You know Mike, Ambassador Bruni, the bow tie guy. Yeah. He's actually lives 20 minutes away from me here in Massachusetts. Cool. Yeah, he's a good friend. He told me this name of an app on the show called Localer, which is an app that helps you find where the locals go in any location. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool app. I could not find it for the life of me. And it turns out it was spelled with like the EU, like the French kind of spelling.
Oh, okay.
Like it was a French word, and I was trying like local with an ER. Like I could not. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a great app. Like I would absolutely go and look that up.
Yeah, it is cool. I tried it. It's a great app. People should check it out. But it's a great example. I could not find it, and it seemed like it would be such a simple word that I could just Google and find. I just want to ask real quick about your thoughts on guest posting, because I know this is something you do a little bit anyways. So I have clients that we're trying to get them to guest publish sometimes. However, they're timid to write outside of their core service or product. So an example is we have a client, they're sales recruiters, and they are timid to write about things outside of that, like entrepreneurship or productivity or anything outside of just their sales recruiting topic. What are your thoughts on that? Should businesses be looking for the exposure to maybe go into things that are slightly outside of their core product or service?
Well, so I mean, what I would be asking is why would you want to go outside of the core of what you do unless it overlapped with your ideal target market? So, for example, let's say you offer, IT services, or managed services, looking after networks, etc. It would definitely. What I would be looking for is to guest post in places where you're not necessarily talking to an IT crowd, because that's not necessarily your target market, and you would be looking at maybe tailoring what you do to a specific target market. For example, looking for sites that cater for lawyers or, over here, solicitors and barristers, and talking about how, the effect of having managed services or things that you need to be aware of if you're a law firm, if you're a legal firm, what your liabilities are, data protection, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still within your core area of expertise, but you're tailoring it to the interests of an audience that you can help. And so I think that's what I would encourage people to do, is to think, well, who are you working? And a great way to do this is to ask your client to talk about some success stories that they've had with their current clients, because that will help them get out of their head and thinking purely about the service that they offer, and help them look for a story that shows how they've helped someone else if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. That's a great tip. I'm definitely going to write that down and bring that to them. Yeah, I think it's sort of hopefully implied that or assume that we're going to try to get them in front of their target audience. I think they're just a little timid to talk about things outside of their core topic, maybe for fear of seeming like they are not experts, or I'm not quite sure what it is. But in general, the point you're saying is that if it gets in front of your target audience and helps them and gets them that exposure, that's really the thing to focus on there.
Absolutely, because you've got to think with a guest post, you want to be reaching people where they think, do you know what? That article is really useful. That's helped me actually think about how we might, modify our IT services or look again and see if there are any liabilities, or if we've got any security breaches that we need to know about. And then, then that company right behind that article is going to be front and center in their mind if they think about outsourcing or getting in touch with someone to solve it for them. Because guest posting is brilliant. It definitely positions you as someone that knows what you're talking about, because you're giving away you're giving away a sort of a free trial of your advice. You're proving that you know what you're talking about, because you're talking, you're hopefully going to be writing something that's useful, that people can use, that people can take away and apply and see mini results. And that helps establish you as someone who is credible and can do what you say you can do. Absolutely.
Two very last quick things. I want to tie all of this together by asking, I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and think, well, that's great. Put humor in your content. Don't use umbrella terms, combine them, blah, blah, blah. How do we measure this though? Like what can a business look at to see if this is actually working?
Do you mean, with content marketing as a whole?
Yes.
Okay, so there's different metrics that you can use. The big one that because content marketing is a long-term game, your big metric is going to be ideally subscribers to your email, to your newsletter list, because that is a method where you can contact people directly. You can start a relationship. You can start, going straight to them with content, with offers, with news, as opposed to, social media metrics are good. They show you that things are getting shared. They show you that you're raising your brand awareness, but they're harder to target. They're harder to pin down and reach your target market. Mm-hmm. So you want to be looking at, newsletter subscribers. Keep an eye on your social media metrics, because that tells you if you produce a piece of content that gets a ton of shares, then that shows you, this is something which is really striking a chord with my customers. Now, was it because I gave them a free fact sheet? Was it because I gave them a template? Or was it just simply the subject matter? So that helps you get great feedback for the future content that you want to write. And then also, are you getting leads and inquiries from people that are either watching your videos or subscribing, or are they taking you up on your offers if you're making offers in your newsletter?
So short of doing any like fancy A/B testing or multivariate testing, you can almost just anecdotally say, well, we updated our pages, we put contrast, we did all these things, and then just kind of gauge, like, even if it's anecdotally, if you've gotten more of what you wanted people to do, newsletter signups, things like that.
Yeah, because testing as well is going to depend on your volume. If you're not getting more than, say, a few hundred visits to a particular page, then testing isn't going to tell you a huge amount. And, these metrics are based on the idea that you are consistently producing content as well. Mm-hmm. So, for content marketing to work, it's not a set and forget. You can't just say, right, I'm going to do 10 blog posts this month and then, just keep sharing those. Whenever I get into a really good rhythm of great clients, high quality leads, it's when I'm showing up consistently. And it's something that it's taken me years to learn. And even though I've thought in the back of my mind, I've known about this, even in the early years, there was a part of me that thought, well, I'll just, content market until I get enough leads, and then things will just kind of naturally settle down. You have to keep showing up. You have to keep showing that you know what you're talking about, that you're up to date, that you're current, that you're there, and that will feed back into your business.
Great tip. Last question. On your Twitter profile, you state that you're a bluegrass singer. Has singing or performing music kind of helped you creatively in terms of being on video or creating marketing content? Like, where do you see kind of your entertainment singing experience kind of cross into marketing?
I think for me, I've always loved singing. I've always loved being on stage. And I would say that for me, it definitely helps me being on camera, because you get very used to sort of how you hold yourself, how you present yourself. And that I know a lot of people I know that come to doing video, that's something that they have to overcome, that sort of not looking too stiff, trying to sound natural. Singing definitely helps. And also the other big thing with singing in like bars and pubs is it's the relationship with the audience.
Yes.
And it is seeing them and getting that instant feedback of what works, what doesn't. And I think maybe as a singer, I was probably more in tune with that than the other members who would, their primary aim was making sure that the breaks were good and, they were really focusing on their instrument. Mm-hmm. Whereas I was focusing on looking at the crowd and seeing what kind of songs they responded to, and then building up a set list around that, and knowing when, gauging the feel of the audience and when the energy flags and when to put in a fast song, when to put in a slow song, etc. And I think that does make you very aware when creating materials about, even though I can't see my audience, when I'm putting my videos together, the audience is in my mind, especially when I come to editing. I want it to be fun for them to watch, and I want it to be useful for them to watch.
Absolutely. I love that. I was a musician too, so I can definitely relate to all of that.
What did you play? See, I'm not a musician at all. I play a little bit of mandolin, but that was only so that we didn't have to add another person to the band.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I went to school for music, piano. I have a degree in piano performance and did some other stuff too. So yeah, I do all the audio production and music on the podcast as well. So that's been a lot of fun.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, but I can definitely relate to what you're saying, that real-time kind of feedback, communication with the audience. You kind of carry that into, like, even now I'm kind of picturing or imagining what the listeners are, thinking or reacting to, even though they're not here in front of us. Any last places you want to mention where people can check you out online, Twitter profiles, website, anywhere you'd like to direct people?
The main sites that I have, I've got writewithinfluence.com, which is my membership site, and then it's harrisonamy.com, which is all my sort of speaking, my blog, Amy TV, that everything, all my writing services and coaching services, all the details are on that site.
Hey everyone, so I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did with Amy Harrison, and you learned as much as I did about contrast, copywriting, umbrella terms, and of course, using some humor in your marketing. And on a serious note, I do sincerely want to make a great podcast, a great show here, and be very proud of it from everything from top to bottom, from the production to how our listing looks in iTunes. And I did kind of realize I went a little overboard with putting keywords and things like that and asking people for reviews and subscriptions. And really, I just want to make a great show. So I hope this is something that you enjoy and find value from. And I promise I will continue making this show as long as people are finding value from it. So I thank you very much for tuning in. I know you have a lot of options out there of podcasts to listen to, and you've chosen this one, and that really means a lot. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.